I did it. I've made it to level 60 on my rogue while obeying the hardcore rule set. This means at no point has my character ever died or traded with anybody or used the auction house, the mailbox, anything like that. Completely solo challenge without ever dying to get to level 60. And there were some dicey moments along the way, but we have finally completed it. And I thought I would make this video today to showcase some of the things that I did in order to be able to successfully complete this challenge, some recommendations I have for you guys if you were to attempt the challenge, and my rather ridiculous plans going forward with regards to this challenge. So let's dive into it. So, the creation of my character. I made an undead rogue to mirror the character that I played in Classic WoW in 2019 that I absolutely loved. And this was for a few reasons. Not only was it nostalgic, but also it was a class for which I was familiar. And if you are going to attempt this challenge, I highly recommend that you go for a class that you are comfortable on. It's going to make a really big difference in terms of your capacity to perform in the challenge, because even if the class that you are familiar with is not a top tier class for doing this challenge, the fact that you will be able to perform all of your actions so autonomously will allow your brain to use its limited resources, if it's anything like mine, to be able to think about the actual situation that you are in and the best things that you can do, as opposed to having to think about the mechanics of how your class works. With that being said, my journey began very simply, much like everybody else's in the starting zone, trying to fight for mobs with every other person on the server, because there are literally thousands of people taking on this challenge, and at the start, things can be very stressful simply trying to get a mob tag, especially if you are going to be playing at peak times or on the weekend. Once I eventually did, however, make it out from the starting zone into the Barrens, things did start to spread out a little bit, and I was able to get a first few little quests done and get my journey up and running. In the beginning, I was very cautious with regards to what things I wanted to attempt and not attempt, as I was very conscious that obviously if I were to die, it would be the end of the run and I would have to start over. So I found myself skipping an awful lot of difficult challenges. However, you'll see in this clip here that soon went away as a philosophy, because while in principle it's good, if you avoid everything that is difficult, not only will the journey be very boring and also just rather tedious, you will find that you also run out of things that you can do to proactively progress your character. If you avoid every scary quest and never do a dungeon, you simply won't be able to actually make it to 60. There isn't enough things for you to be able to do, shy of simply mob grinding if you have the patience to do so. And looking back over the footage that I have for making this video, I was very happy to see that I have actually clipped what I think is probably the closest call that I had along the way outside of dungeons, when attempting to complete the troll quests up in the northwest of Stranglethorn. This was very dicey because the mobs were considerably higher level than me and came in a multi-pack, but it was something that I was able to accomplish with a degree of difficulty. Now, doing things like this can be very scary, but of course if this is, say, for example, the only quest you have remaining to you and you have no other option for getting yourself the experience required to level up, you do have to consider doing these scarier quests, especially because a lot of them have really good rewards. And if you're playing a character such as a melee character that's very weapon dependent and you are, say, 10 levels behind on your weapons, you're going to find that everything suddenly becomes scary, even the things that you wouldn't think would be, because all of the basic mobs become very challenging to kill. And at that point, it's actually scarier to progress without the weapon than it is to progress without doing these scary quests. So you do have to make these judgments all of the time in terms of what is the best thing to do for the progression of your character. One thing that will help you avoid this problem, however, is doing dungeons. Now, this is something that I highly recommend. You are going to find yourself at times with a lack of options in terms of what you want to go about doing. Certainly, if, like me, there's a lot of certain areas or questions you just don't like in the game and you want to avoid them. Doing dungeons is going to be able to get you a massive amount of gear progression, as well as, of course, a lot of experience for the completion of the dungeon. Now, due to the rules of the challenge, you can only complete each dungeon once, which does mean that you are going to want to spend the time making sure you get every single dungeon quest ready to go before you go into the dungeon. So this is worth researching in advance and getting everything completed before you go in. Now, most dungeons in this challenge are actually very safe because the vast majority of groups that want to go and do these dungeons are so petrified of dying that they won't take anybody that is actually a reasonable level for the dungeon and will only go in with a full group that grossly over levels it. I.e. by this that the vast majority of groups will not take players to whom the final boss is not at very worst yellow but probably green. Now, this does remove a lot of the challenge, but in the higher level dungeons, things still can go sideways, as you will probably be seeing in the footage right now when I have finished editing this video. I still highly recommend doing these dungeons, however, because the vast majority of the best equipment that is going to be very beneficial to you is going to be found in these dungeons, and dungeon quests can prove to be incredibly lucrative in terms of experience. Zul'Farrak alone, I believe, gave me about 1.5 to 2 levels with all of the dungeon experience and all of the quests that were completed, as well as 3 or 4 different blue items that were incredibly good for my character, which made it a very worthwhile investment in terms of completing this challenge and setting me up to be able to go on and do some of the harder content that was ahead of me. The last thing worth mentioning, however, is that while it's very good to do this hard content and the dungeons and get all of your gear, it is really important to know your limitations. Now, these could be your limitations as a player, they could be the limitations of your character and its class and what it's actually capable of doing, or even perhaps just your gear or professions limiting you in your capacities, or the inability to get groups for dungeons. All these things are limiting factors. And they are something that you always need to be considering because you do not want to attempt something that is beyond your limits. The good example of this is the BRD run that I'm probably showing you on screen now, because in this BRD run we were attempting, we were actually relatively low level comparative to what most people do in this challenge attempt. Most people actually don't go into BRD until they are a full group of level 60s. We wanted to try and get a run in to get some experience along the way and a few of the quests completed, because if there was no reason to not do, essentially, because we wouldn't have got any other value out of BRD pre-60 anyway, and once you reach level 60 you can run dungeons as much as you want. With that in mind, it meant that we were able to go into BRD and assess each and every boss and whether or not it was worthwhile our attempt to do so. We got an awful lot of bosses dead and a great deal of gear progression for all characters involved and an awful lot of experience. However, when we got to the Grim Guzzler, we did discover that things can go very sideways and we did actually have to run out of the dungeon before everybody died. There was also an issue, which I'm showing you here, where we pulled a few extra mobs before the Golem boss, just after General Angerforge, and this could have gone very awry as well. We did manage to recover from this one, but this was the point where we started to realise that we might be pushing the limits of what our characters were currently capable of. Decided to go back and clear some of the easier content because of course BRD is not a particularly linear dungeon, and then call it a day. We were very happy with the value we got out of this dungeon, and best of all, we didn't attempt anything that was beyond us and result in our deaths. Then with all of this out of the way and the last high level quests that I was able to feel I was confident in completing out of the way, there was very little experience left on the board for me, resulting in a grind to 60 to end it. And I'll be honest with you, I actually really enjoy a good grind, so there was probably other things that I could have done. But the vast majority of characters that I level actually get level 60 in this exact location that you'll be seeing on screen here, so it was actually something of a nostalgic thing for me as well. And I was able to complete getting level 60 with the absolute mass murder of Blackrock Warlocks and Slayers. Now, this was a lot of fun in terms of completing this challenge. I had an absolute laugh doing it. And as a result, I have a very ambitious challenge that I've set myself ahead of this, in that I am actually going to attempt to get every single class to level 60 in the hardcore rule set. Now, I have absolutely no preconceptions about my capacities as a WoW player, or even just my capacity of time IRL to be able to take on this challenge, and have no doubt that I will not actually achieve it. But I do like to set incredibly lofty goals, and I have already begun work on every single class in towards getting it up to level 60. The vast majority of them are only in the level 10 to 20 mark. However, the few of them are running ahead as well, and as it stands so far, I haven't yet lost a particularly high level character, only one above level 20, meaning that I am hopeful that I'll be able to get at least a few more characters there very soon. But that's going to about wrap it up for today, guys. I do hope you enjoyed this video with a recap of my journey so far and what I intend on doing going forward. If you have any questions about the hardcore challenge, feel free to leave them down below and I will do my utmost to answer them for you so you can get in on enjoying this game mode as well. But for now, guys, thanks for watching and I hope to see you in the next one. Laters.